Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Blood pounded in my ears like a war drum, drowning out the frantic beat of the rain against the shattered window pane of the chemistry lab. I was trapped, pressed spine first against the cold slate of the chalkboard, with nowhere left to run. Looming over me was the architect of my high school misery, a boy carved from marble and malice, his hand slammed against the board next to my head, boxing me in. But this wasn't the usual torment. There was no sneer on his lips, no cruel laughter echoing from his cronies in the hallway. There was only the heavy, ragged sound of our breathing and a terrifying intensity in his eyes that looked less like hatred and more like hunger. "Do it," he rasped, his voice a low growl that vibrated through my chest. "Do it again, Julian." His name was Damon Cross. At St. Sterling's Academy for the Elite, he was a god. I was the scholarship student, the insect he enjoyed crushing beneath his designer loafers. But 30 seconds ago, in a moment of panicked insanity induced by the approaching footsteps of the disciplinary committee, students Damon himself had sent to hunt me down earlier. I had done the unthinkable. To silence him, to shock him into freezing so he wouldn't be caught breaking curfew in a prohibited zone, I had grabbed the lapels of his blazer and kissed him. It was supposed to be a distraction, a tactical error, a suicide mission. But Damon Cross, the tyrant who dated supermodels and broke jaws on the weekends, hadn't shoved me away. He hadn't punched me. He had frozen, his entire body going rigid as stone, before melting into the touch with a frightening desperation. Now, the footsteps outside had faded, but the danger in the room had skyrocketed. I said. Damon whispered, leaning in until his nose brushed mine, his scent of rain, tobacco, and expensive sandalwood overwhelming my senses. "Again. You're insane," I choked out, my voice trembling. My hands were still clutching his jacket, knuckles white. "Damon, you hate me. You've spent 3 years making my life a living hell. And you're straight. Everyone knows the Cross heir is straight." Damon's eyes, usually cold shards of ice blue, darkened to a turbulent navy. He moved his hand from the chalkboard to my jaw, his thumb tracing my lower lip with a touch that was bruisingly possessive. It was a contradiction that made my head spin, the violence of his reputation clashing with the trembling heat of his fingers. "I thought I was a lot of things," Damon murmured, his gaze dropping to my mouth. "I thought I was untouchable. I thought I was hollow." He tilted his head, the ghost of a flush creeping up his high, pale cheekbones, a splash of color on a statue. "Then you put your mouth on mine, Julian," and for the first time in my life, the noise in my head stopped. He didn't wait for my permission. He didn't ask. He crashed his lips against mine, and it wasn't the clumsy, accidental collision of a moment ago. It was a devouring. It was a claim. And as I melted against the chalkboard, the chalk dust coating the back of my uniform, I realized with a sinking heart that I hadn't just kissed the school bully. I had awakened a starving beast, and I was the only thing on the menu. The hierarchy of St. Sterling's was simple: predators and prey. Damon Cross was the apex predator. His father was a senator with ties to industries that didn't appear on tax returns, and his mother was a socialite who treated her children like accessories. Damon walked the halls with a lethal grace, a retinue of sycophants trailing him like remora fish. He was cruel, yes, but efficient. He didn't bully for fun. He bullied to maintain order. He bullied to ensure everyone knew their place. And my place? I was the grime on his shoe. I was Julian Vane, the son of a mechanic, surviving on a scholarship and invisible to everyone, except him. For 3 years, I couldn't figure out why he targeted me. He would knock books out of my hands, trip me in the cafeteria, or lock me in the equipment shed. But looking back, through the lens of that kiss in the chemistry lab, the memories shifted. He knocked the books out of my hands, but he always lingered to watch me pick them up. He tripped me, but he never let his goons touch me. He locked me in the shed, but he always left the window unlocked, ensuring I could get out after he'd made his point. It wasn't bullying. It was attention. Warped, twisted, maladjusted attention from a boy who had never been taught the language of kindness. The day after the incident in the lab, the atmosphere in the school shifted. I walked into the cafeteria, tray in hand, keeping my head down. Usually, This was the time a stray apple or a jeer would come flying my way from the cross table. Silence. The chatter died down. I looked up, adjusting my glasses. Damon sat at the center of the room, his usual court surrounding him. But he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at me. He was wearing a black turtleneck that accentuated the sharp line of his jaw and silver rings that glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights. He lifted a hand, pointing a single, long finger at the empty chair beside him. The cafeteria gasped. That chair was reserved. It was the seat of power. No one sat next to Damon Cross unless they were royalty or carrying his child. My legs felt like lead. To refuse him was social suicide. To accept him was, well, I didn't know what that was yet. I walked over, the sound of my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum echoing like gunshots. When I reached the table, the other elites, girls with perfect hair and boys with watches worth more than my house, stared at me with open hostility. Sit, Damon commanded softly. I sat. I didn't eat. I just stared at the plastic tray, feeling the heat radiating off him. Eat, he said, sliding his own untouched bowl of gourmet fruit toward me. You look pale. I'm not hungry, I whispered, terrified that the entire school was watching. I didn't ask if you were hungry. I told you to eat. His voice was low, for my ears only. Under the table, his hand found my knee. His grip was tight, possessive. You need your energy. You have a lot of explaining to do later. Explaining? I squeaked. About why you've been hiding from me, he said, his thumb rubbing circles into my denim jeans. And why it took you 3 years to do what you did last night. Damon, I hissed, leaning in. We can't do this here. You have an image. You're the king of Sterling. If they think you're gay. He finished the sentence with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Bent. Broken. He leaned back, removing his hand, his expression turning icy as he addressed the table at large. Everyone leave. Now. It took 3 seconds for the table to clear. Even his closest friends scrambled away, sensing the darkening mood. We were alone in a sea of onlookers, an island of tension. I don't care about labels, Julian, Damon said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. I care about what belongs to me. And after last night, I decided. You belong to me. I am not an object. I snapped, a spark of anger cutting through the fear. I'm a person. You can't just claim me because I kissed you once to stop you from getting us both expelled. Damon's eyes narrowed. Is that what you think happened? You think you kissed me to save us? He let out a dark, dry chuckle. Julian, I saw the disciplinary committee coming down the hall 5 minutes before you did. I could have sent them away with a single look. I let them come close because I wanted to see what you would do when you were cornered. My blood ran cold. You set me up? I engineered a variable, he corrected smoothly. I needed to break the stalemate. I've been watching you for 3 years. I know your schedule, your grades, the way you bite your pen when you're thinking, the way you flinch when someone raises a hand. I know everything about you. But you were always so far away. I needed the catalyst. You're a sociopath, I whispered. Maybe, he agreed, leaning forward, his eyes burning with that same intense hunger. But I'm a sociopath who is obsessed with you. And now that I know you taste like mint and terror, I'm not letting go. The weeks that followed were a blur of confusion and secret encounters. It was a slow burn, a torturous dance of push and pull. Publicly, Damon was still the ice prince, though the physical bullying stopped completely. Instead, it was replaced by a terrifying protective streak. If a teacher gave me a hard time, they were transferred the next day. If a student bumped into me in the hall, they were found apologizing profusely within the hour, looking pale and shaken. Privately, however, the dynamic was different. We met in the old library archives, in the back of his chauffeured car, on the roof of the astronomy tower. It was in these moments that the mask cracked. I learned that Damon Cross wasn't just a bully. He was a victim of his own lineage. One rainy Tuesday, he showed up at my dorm room window, having climbed the trellis like a thief, soaking wet and shivering. When I let him in, I saw the bruise blooming across his ribs, angry and purple against his alabaster skin. My father, was all he said, collapsing onto my narrow bed. I grabbed the first aid kit, my hands shaking as I lifted his shirt. Why? He found out I turned down the engagement to the senator's daughter. Damon hissed as I applied the antiseptic. He said I was becoming soft. Liability. Does he know about us? I asked, taping the gauze down. Damon looked at me, his eyes vulnerable for the first time. He knows there's someone. He doesn't know who. If he knew it was you, a boy, and a poor one at that, he wouldn't just hurt you, Julian. He would erase you. Then stop, I pleaded, sitting back. Damon, stop this. Go back to being the king. Marry the girl. I can't. I can't be the reason you get destroyed. Damon sat up, wincing, and grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, but his eyes were blazing. You don't get it. You aren't the reason I'm being destroyed. You're the reason I'm surviving. Before you, I was just waiting to turn into him. Cold. Dead inside. You make me feel human. You make me feel like I have a soul, even if it's a dark one. He pulled me closer, burying his face in my neck. Don't ask me to be straight, Julian. Don't ask me to be a cross. Just let me be yours. That was the night the bully died and the partner was born. We lay there in the dark, the storm raging outside, and he held me like I was the only anchor in a hurricane. I realized then that his aggression, his need for control, was a defense mechanism. He controlled me because he couldn't control anything else in his life. But now, he was learning to trust, learning to yield. But secrets in St. Sterling's have a shelf life, and ours expired on the night of the winter gala. It was a mandatory event. Black tie, masks, a masquerade of wealth and deceit. I was working as a server, part of my scholarship duties. Damon was the guest of honor, standing beside his father, a tall, imposing man who looked like an older, crueler version of Damon. I was carrying a tray of champagne flutes, trying to remain invisible, when I felt a hand on my arm. It was Damon's father. You're the vain boy, Mr. Cross said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and terrifying. Yes, sir, I managed, gripping the tray. My son has been distracted lately, he said, his eyes boring into mine. He seems to think he has found a pet. A little stray to entertain him. I froze. He knew. Damon is a cross, the father continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. We do not keep pets that soil the carpet. Tonight, Damon will announce his engagement to Miss Arlington. If he does not, or if he creates a scene, well, accidents happen to mechanics' sons every day. Brakes fail. Fires start. He patted my shoulder, a gesture of mock affection, and walked away. Panic clawed at my throat. I had to leave. I had to disappear. I turned to run toward the kitchen, but I collided with a hard chest. Damon. He was wearing a black velvet mask, but I knew those eyes. He grabbed my arms to steady me. Julian? What's wrong? You're shaking. Your father, I gasped. He knows. Damon, you have to let me go. He threatened me. He threatened my dad. Damon went still. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked over my shoulder at his father, who was watching us from across the ballroom with a smug glass of scotch in hand. He threatened you? Damon asked, his voice eerily calm. He said I was a pet. He said you have to announce the engagement. Tears stung my eyes. Please, Damon. Just do it. I'm nobody. It's not worth it. Damon slowly reached up and removed his mask. He dropped it on the floor and crushed it beneath his heel. The sound of cracking plastic echoed in the sudden silence of the nearby guests. You're right, Damon said loud enough for the people around us to hear. It's not worth it. My heart shattered. I nodded, stepping back. Okay, I understand. No, Damon said, grabbing my hand and interlacing our fingers. He turned to face the room, to face his father. Hiding isn't worth it. Living under his thumb isn't worth it. He pulled me toward the center of the room. The murmurs grew to a roar. The senator's face turned purple with rage. He started moving toward us, his security detail flanking him. Damon, his father roared. Stop this foolishness immediately. Damon stopped. He looked at his father, then at the terrified elites watching, and finally at me. He looked at me with a tenderness that defied every rumor, every label, and every expectation. You asked me once if I was straight, Damon said, his voice ringing through the ballroom. I told you I didn't care about labels. But if you need an answer, here it is. He cupped my face with both hands, ignoring the approaching security guards, ignoring his father's screaming. I am in love with Julian Vane. And then he kissed me. It wasn't like the kiss in the lab, desperate and dark. It wasn't like the kisses in the dorm, needy and pained. This was a declaration of war. It was defiant. It was a seal breaking. Flashbulbs popped. Gasps echoed. I felt the vibration of his heart against mine, beating a frantic, furious rhythm. When we pulled apart, the senator was standing 3 feet away, his face twisted in fury. "You are disowned," he spat. "You are nothing. You leave this family with nothing but the clothes on your back." Damon smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had ever seen on him. It was sharp, dangerous, and incredibly free. "Keep the money," Damon said, gripping my hand tighter. "Keep the legacy. Keep the blood money and the lies. I have the only thing in this room that's real." He turned to me. "Ready to run, Julian?" I looked at the chaos around us, at the ruined reputation of the Cross dynasty, and then at the boy who had burned his kingdom to the ground just to hold my hand. "Yeah," I breathed. "Let's run." We didn't look back as we sprinted out of the ballroom, past the stunned doormen, and into the cold night air. We had no money, no plan, and powerful enemies. But as we ran into the darkness, Damon's laughter echoed, a sound of pure, unadulterated liberation. The bully was gone. The air was dead. But the man holding my hand, he was just getting started. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, by letting himself be swallowed whole. If you enjoyed seeing Damon burn his legacy for love, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a tormentor who sacrificed everything to save you? Or is the past unforgivable? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.